Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Non-Traditional Nurse. Today, I'm really excited to chat with Tierra. Thanks so much for joining us, Tierra.
Hi, thank you so much for having me here, Ellie. This is going to be a lot of fun.
So, Tierra is going to talk to us today about her experience working as a lactation consultant. So, we're going to explore how she transitioned into lactation consulting, the steps she took to get there, and then dive into what makes this role so fulfilling for her. So, to get started, can you tell us just about your nursing journey and what led you to pursue a career as a lactation consultant?
Yeah, absolutely. It was kind of one of those things where life sort of gives you something, and there's not always like this direct, like I want to go this way. So early in my career, I just ended up really being interested in birth and wanting to go to birth and like support my friends in birth. And so I ended up in a path of becoming a birth doula. And this is after my first daughter was born. So I was like so inspired to like help other women have babies and the transformation that happens over that course of that. So, in the process of that, I thought it would be a really good idea to be a little bit more trained in breastfeeding. And so I took a local course here that was helping, it was like more of like a peer support. And so I wanted to use that as part of my practice. And in the midst of that, I got this is actually even before becoming a nurse. I got a job offer to support the one of the local hospitals here as a sort of a tech in their lactation office and use some of my skills. So I did that and I worked there in this wonderful department for about 4 years. And in the midst, I was like, I think it might be a good idea for me to go to nursing school. So I went to nursing school while I was working there. And upon graduation, funny enough, I left lactation behind. Really, like, not completely because I got hired in the same hospital as a labor and delivery nurse. And so it's really part of that role as well. And so I didn't really focus my journey on that. So fast forward to 17 years later, I gained a lot of lactation experience, of course, just over the course of that. And we have a really unique department where we do labor, delivery, recovery, and postpartum all in the same unit. So you may show up one day and just have three postpartum couplets, and you're going to have a lot of lactation on your shift. And so after 17 years, COVID hit. And it was just sort of a reworking of my career. What did I want to do? It was sort of that phase that we all kind of had some questions about during that time. And so that was when I came out and really went through the official lactation consulting journey and got certified and really took time off. I wasn't even working at the hospital during that time. And then the same person that hired me right in the very beginning was retiring. She called me up like, I think it was 3 months after I was certified. She's like, hey, I think you should apply for my job. I think it would be really great for you. And so again, like the pieces just kind of got laid out for me to just step into that role. And so now that fast forward, now it's been about 2 years and it's been a whole lot of fun being back here.
Yeah, that's kind of a full circle moment for you. And
Absolutely.
it seems that COVID really made a lot of people step back and kind of look at their careers and what is next and kind of take shifts we didn't even expect. So,
Yeah.
and then more specifically, could you walk us through kind of the certification and training process for a nurse that really wants to become a lactation consultant?
Yeah. So as a nurse, it's a little bit easier, especially if you work in this field where you're naturally getting exposure and support to lactation. So there's different pathways. If you work in the labor and delivery field, you can quantify the hours of lactation support. So they want you to have 1,000 hours of clinical support in the past 5 years. So you do really have to do some math and kind of figure out how much time you're spending in that to quantify that well. So that's one way. And another way is you actually can take a lactation education course. So a certified course that's actually moving you through, it's either a physical or an online course that's actually moving you through that pathway. And there's several of them out there. Here in California, they have a pretty strong one through UC San I think it's actually University of San Diego. I want to say UC San Diego, but I think it's actually University of San Diego. And it's online, so you don't have to be there to take it. And then there's a third pathway where you actually can be mentored with a lactation consultant, which I think honestly would be like, if you had the time, it's 500 hours, but it's like
Wow.
direct mentorship. And that kind of a pathway, I think, just being sort of the fly on the wall and integrating knowledge with another active practice, I think is, I mean, it's like sort of that apprenticeship model in a way. I think would be such a great way to learn if that's a possibility. And so doing that, you have to actually be, um, you have to be actually, find somebody and be there and work in that facility. And that's quite a big commitment for that lactation consultant too. Or maybe even the facility if you're kind of moving through a few lactation consultants that are helping you. And I think that journey is 500 hours. So it's a little bit less, but you can imagine how much more intensive and a lot of feedback that would give you.
Absolutely, and I think in any line of nursing, having a mentor is such a huge help and someone that you can really bounce your questions off of and everything, so
Yeah.
awesome, and what nursing experiences that you had or skills do you think best prepared you for this role?
One of my favorite things to do, Ellie, in um, supporting women in labor, because really when I worked on my labor and delivery unit, I was always clamoring for the labors. Like I really wasn't super interested in doing a lot of postpartum, although it's fun. There's a lot of teaching in it. But I would always call it waitress nursing, because these are healthy people, right? I mean, they're
Yeah.
mostly people that are not sick, that are not, hooked up to a lot of IV medications, etc. They're recovering, so I was always just feeling like I'm delivering diapers, or maybe I'm going to watch a latch, or maybe I'm giving medications, or it just felt like I was so spread out thin. I really like the intensive focus of being one-on-one. And so I think that's kind of like maybe if I was in another life and the ICU nurse in me, so lactation. So in that, I want to say like, it's the presencing piece. It was the piece of not just, you know, guiding and telling and showing. It was more just the presencing piece of just being there with this person through this intense journey and just really connecting with them on a human one-on-one, woman to woman level. And I think I carry that same thing into lactation. I find that like, yeah, sure, maybe we can be a sleuth and kind of figure out what the problem is here in your lactation, consultation. But I feel like most of the time these women come in just really wanting to be heard and seeing how hard their journey is. And I just love to take the time to like nod with them and listen to them and let them kind of pour their story out. And then in the meantime, maybe there's some patching up of sore nipples or, helping the baby transfer some more milk or whatever that might be.
Yeah, absolutely, and having a one-year-old, I can say that this journey doesn't feel too far in the past, and lactation was such a helpful part of that when you're going through, the tough times and the tears and the hormones, and your partner wants to support you, but they aren't doing the same things, and they can't truly understand like a lactation consultant can be, so I think that support for women is just so incredibly helpful. And you probably touched on this a little bit, but what do you find most rewarding about working as lactation consultant?
You know, um, I feel that it's a little bit different than like a regular hospital unit in the sense that we get to function on baby time, which, the hospital, when you're doing acute care, it can really sometimes feel like factory time. I just mean,
Absolutely.
we're moving a patient along a journey, and actually, we're
Yeah.
trying to do it as quickly as we can in some respects. I mean, of course, a labor, at least in our magnet hospital, has been really well supported to allow the time to take place for delivery. But um, it still is like, okay, so once they have their baby and they get the recovery finished in 2 hours, and then we got to get them out, within a day or two, right? So it really feels like that you're moving on kind of a conveyor belt. Wherein Lactation, I mean, we do have an appointment time, but it just you can't force a baby to do things any faster than they're really willing to do. So I feel like it's been really lovely to be on that time frame, which feels very much more connected to nature. And there's a little bit more flow in it where you kind of feel like you're moving in and like, wow, what happened to the day, which is a really common thing that happens when you have a baby. I don't know if you remember where you like get up in the morning, and you start feeding and maybe you get a little thing done, or you're like, what happened to the day? Like, was I
Yes.
in like that twilight zone or some kind of time warp? That happens here too, because you kind of like drop in a little bit into this reality that's just more based in nature, I guess, even though you're inside of a building, but you're really connected. So I think that's been incredibly rewarding where it feels like I'm actually working in an environment. Of course, it's really helpful and it's meaningful and all that, but it feels like there's flow and it feels like there's some kind of magical element that's happening that's just carrying you along. I know that might sound
Yes.
weird, but it's true. It's just very interesting and really, really rewarding, like you said.
Yeah, and I can totally see that from a couple of perspectives. One, yeah, where does the time go when you have a little one? Your time flies by in 3-hour blocks, it seems, and all of a sudden it's nighttime again. But also, yeah, I came from an ICU background and it felt like, we're at a well-oiled machine and, moving the patients through this trajectory, as you say. So I can totally understand the beauty in, following the more natural course of, what the baby needs at that time is really, really special.
Yeah.
In terms of, the flexibility of being a lactation consultant, schedule, work-life balance, can you talk to us about some of the perks or challenges of that?
Yeah. Well, a lot of times in nursing, your job's just not done till it's done.
Mhm.
So, like, you might have a shift, but, maybe there's some things that take place where you have to be there a little bit longer than expected. So I guess that's kind of leading with saying, yeah, I do typically work just an 8-hour shift. We're in a really unique situation where we're an outpatient clinic inside of a hospital. And so we have a lot of variety. I mean, I might see a 1-year-old in my clinic, and then I'm walking out, taking, whatever it is, 25 yards to get into a unit where I'm seeing, 0 to 3 to 4 day olds. So it's a broad range. And it's a lot dependent on patient census. We have a lot of people in there. We have to see a lot of people. And same with the outpatient clinic and how much we have scheduled. So it's typically an 8-hour day, but it can often run over a little bit. And then in terms of flexibility, we have a very small department. There's 5 of us, and most of them are real. It's really more 4. We have 1 per diem that works, just kind of fills in almost rarely. And so, I'm working with some of the same people that I worked with over my career, and I'm also working with some of the same people that I worked with when I started out in my same clinic before I became a nurse. So
How
we're a
cool.
tight family. Um, you know, One of those people was like at my wedding, 20 years ago. So we're tight. And so like I would say I'm in a unique situation where we really flex for each other. If something comes up, like example, my son had a track meet on Saturday and I didn't know it until my schedule was in place. And so just a quick call, they were willing to trade, can I work this day instead so that I can go to my son's track meet? So that's been a lot of flexibility there. But I think all in all, it's in my particular case and other clinics that I know of that are in the area, it's a typical pointed position. It just depends on if you're, working 8/10 or if you're, working 6/10 or, a full in terms of that kind of flexibility. Um, I do get home late sometimes, for my kids. So that balance is kind of, luckily my kids are older now, so it's not that huge, but even when you have teenagers, you miss them, and you want to be home making them dinner or whatever. So,
Absolutely, and we see that in a lot of areas of nursing is, you gotta finish what you need to finish before heading home, so
yeah.
totally understandable. And then for nurses that are thinking about the idea of lactation consulting, how would you recommend they might begin to get a sense of whether this career would be a good fit for them or not?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I would see if maybe you can contact anybody that you have local to you. I don't think that IBCLE, which is the board certification, that's an international organization. So, like unlike nurses, we don't have to get licenses in different states, right? We can work anywhere in the world, which is so cool. So, contacting a local lactation clinic would be a great place to start. See if you can shadow. A lot of lactation consultants are very open to having another professional shadow them. And come in and kind of see the work that they do, maybe give resources in terms of their own pathway and in terms of how they got there. Um, and maybe even speaking with somebody that's maybe somewhat ancillary to that. There's different levels because you can become a lactation educator, which is less less hours and less intensive, and so that might be like a starter place is to do that. And then also this peer support group, this is kind of where I started out, was taking a 6-week course in it and then seeing what's out in the community to do that kind of support with, which would be a lot less time to kind of get your feet wet and see how that felt.
Yeah, that's some great advice, and I think something I didn't know was that you aren't limited by state for that certification. That's really wonderful. So,
Yeah.
if you need a little bit of flexibility in terms of location, this could be a really good option.
Yeah, I never really thought about working international, but but
Yeah.
could be possibility. So so our title is IBCLC, so it's International Board Certified Lactation Consultant.
Awesome.
And then one more piece about that too that could be helpful is um, that organization, and they are nationwide. Is called Nursing Mothers Council, so people might want to look that up in their local area. But also La Leche League, depending on where people live, there might be more active chapter of La Leche League, and attending their meetings or checking out what kinds of peer support programs they have within those organizations would be helpful.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And
Mhm.
Tira, thanks so much for sharing your story. This has been a really informative conversation.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Ellie. I'm happy to share and happy to, encourage other healthcare professionals out there to check out the path because it's so needed. It's so I mean, just to have this kind of a start in life, and even if it's not something that someone can do, to cheer mothers along the way, to offer the best they can, and also to give them the space to have permission to feed other methods if that's what they need to do, because there's a lot of shame and guilt in that space. And so that's another thing that I feel really happy to do in my journey, is to really, let them know that, hey, love is the biggest food for your baby, and everything else is just icing on the cake. So, don't be hard on yourself. Like, this is a journey.
Yeah, and those are things that every mother needs to hear, I think. It's a can be a tough journey, especially the first time you go through it. So I think it is such a wonderful support for mothers and babies, and I just think it's such a cool path that nurses can take. So I really appreciate your time today.
Oh, thank you so much, Ellie. Yeah, it's been wonderful to be here with you today.
Yeah. And then for all our viewers interested in exploring more non traditional nursing careers like lactation consulting, make sure to subscribe to the Non Traditional Nurse newsletter. You're going to receive monthly interviews and career deep dives delivered right to your inbox. So thanks again for tuning in, and we will see you next time. Thanks again, Tiara.
Yeah, great.